My parents abandoned my 6-year-old son outside a community center because I refused to fund their favorite son's $50,000 business. They claimed it was a lesson for me for turning my back on family. 3 months later, the judge's verdict left them shocked and ashamed. I never thought I'd find myself in this position, taking my own parents to court for abandoning my 6-year-old son. Even now, saying those words out loud feels like some twisted dream I can't quite shake off. But it's real, and it all started with a family that never really acted like one. My name's Noah, and I'm 32 years old. I live in Seattle with my wife, Kelly, and our 2 kids. I've been a paramedic for the past 9 years. Most days, I'm the guy people call when everything's gone wrong. But what happens when the emergency's in your own family and no one's coming to help? That's where my story begins. Back in the day, I didn't think I'd ever have to draw those battle lines. I'd always been the one to keep the peace, the one to hold everything together, especially after I met Kelly. I still remember that first day like it was yesterday. She was sitting across from me at a first aid workshop, scribbling notes in this beat-up green notebook. We talked for hours after class, about nothing and everything. For years later, we got married in a tiny church in Ballard, Seattle. 2018. Feels like a lifetime ago. We didn't have much, but it didn't matter. We found this small craftsman house in Greenwood, a little beat-up, but cozy. The kind of place where you could almost see a future. When Max was born in 2019, that future felt even more real. He was this chubby little bundle of squeaks and gummy smiles, and right away, he became the center of our world. My parents, Emily and Frank, fell head over heels for him too. Back then, I thought we were building something strong together, 3 generations bound by love. I can still picture my mom's face the first time she held Max. She called him her sunshine boy, and my dad, who was always so stoic, actually cracked a real smile. They spoiled him rotten books, puzzles, stuffed animals bigger than he was. In those early days, there was laughter in the air, like we were a real family. Like maybe this time, we'd all be enough. But looking back now, I realize it was never about love. It was about control. It was about who held the power and who was always expected to give it up. This story isn't just about what they did. It's about why I finally reached my breaking point. It's about how I had to fight for my own son, even when it meant losing the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. And if you're listening, if you're still here, I guess you already know how it ended. But let me start from the beginning. I grew up with a younger brother named Luke. He's 4 years younger than me, but you'd never know it from the way our parents doted on him. If I was the one who kept things running, Luke was the one they ran after. He was always the center of everything, and I was just there, I guess. It's not like I was some bitter older brother, at least not in the beginning. When we were kids, I'd see my mom fussing over Luke's piano lessons, signing him up for soccer, buying him brand new bikes every other year. Meanwhile, I'd get a pat on the shoulder and a lecture about how I needed to make sacrifices for your brother. That was my dad's favorite phrase, sacrifice. Like it was some holy duty I was supposed to take on. By the time I was 12, I'd already figured out that Luke could do no wrong. He was the golden boy, the one who'd breeze through life with everyone else smoothing the way for him. And me? I was the one holding the safety net. I tried not to let it get to me. Even when Luke switched hobbies faster than most people change clothes, photography 1 month, electric guitar the next, I kept telling myself he'd figure it out eventually. I just had to be patient. When I moved out at 20 to start paramedic training, Luke was still at home, drifting from one passion project to another. My parents never seemed to mind. They'd always say, Luke's just finding himself. You should be proud of how supportive you are. And I was. Or at least, I tried to be. It was in late 2022 when Luke first came to me with a serious request. He wanted to open a photography studio, said it was his dream, that he just needed a little help getting started. $8,000, to be exact. Kelly was skeptical, but I couldn't say no. It was family, and family helps family, right? I gave him the money, no questions asked. I remember writing the check, telling myself it would be the last time he needed me to bail him out. The studio didn't even last 6 months. By the time it folded, Luke had already moved on to the next big idea. That's when he showed up again, this time looking like he hadn't slept in days. He said he'd maxed out his credit cards, $5,000 in the hole, and asked me for another loan. Kelly was more than skeptical then. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, her fingers drumming on the wood. Noah, she said, her voice low but steady. I love your brother, but we can't keep doing this. We've got Max to think about, and there's another baby on the way. I know, I said, but in my head, I was already calculating how to scrape together the money for Luke, because that's what I'd always done. I gave him the $5,000. It was like second nature by then, almost like I'd stopped thinking about whether it was fair to Kelly or to Max. Luke always needed help, and I was always the one to give it. But I'd be lying if I said there wasn't a little voice in my head, getting louder every time. A voice that whispered, this isn't about love. This is about you being the safety net, and him never having to learn how to stand on his own. I tried to shut it out. I really did. Because if I stopped being the one to keep things together, I didn't know who I'd be. But deep down, even then, I think I knew it couldn't last forever. It was early 2024 when Luke showed up at our front door again, clutching a battered leather binder and wearing this eager smile that I'd seen too many times before. Max was in the living room, building a tower out of his toy blocks, and Kelly was in the kitchen with a mug of peppermint tea. She was 6 months pregnant then, and everything seemed so delicate, like it could tip either way. "Noah," Luke said as soon as I opened the door, "I've got something big to talk to you about." He stepped inside like he owned the place, flipping the binder open on our coffee table without even taking off his coat. I sat down across from him, and he started talking a mile a minute. "I'm launching this new business, an event planning service for luxury weddings," he said, his hands moving fast as he turned the pages of his makeshift business plan. "Seattle's a huge market for it, Noah. I've already got a couple of potential partners lined up, and I just need a bit more to make it happen." He paused, looking up at me with that same hopeful grin he'd always had. "I need $50,000 just to cover the initial costs and secure the venue partnerships." I felt the blood drain from my face. 50,000. It was a number that made my stomach clench. I thought of the new crib Kelly had just picked out for the baby, of the bills waiting in the stack on our kitchen counter, of Max's preschool tuition that we'd just managed to squeeze into the budget. "Luke," I said, my voice catching in my throat, "that's a lot of money." He brushed it off like it was nothing. "I know it's a lot, but I've never been more serious about anything, Noah. I've got some investors already interested. I just need you to help me close the gap. We're family, man. You know I'd do the same for you." Kelly had walked into the room by then, and I could feel her eyes on me, watching every word. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. I could hear her thoughts as loud as if she'd spoken them. "This is enough. We can't keep doing this." I took a deep breath, trying to steady the storm of guilt and fear in my chest. "Luke, I can't," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "We've got another baby coming. I've helped you so many times already." For a second, I thought he'd understand. I thought maybe he'd see how tired I was, how much I'd given. But his face darkened, his jaw tightening like I'd just slapped him. "You're really going to turn your back on me?" he snapped. "After everything I've done for you?" I stared at him, dumbfounded. "What have you done for me, Luke?" He shot up from the couch, pacing like a caged animal. "You've got a good job, Noah. A house, a family. You've always had it all. I just need a chance to get my own life together, and you're standing in the way. You're being selfish." Selfish. That word sliced through me like a knife. I wanted to shout that I'd been anything but, that every time I'd handed him money, it was a piece of my own family I was sacrificing. But I didn't say that. I just looked at him, at the brother I'd spent my whole life trying to lift up, and realized I didn't recognize him anymore. The argument went on for what felt like hours, voices raised and doors slamming. Max started to cry from the other room, and Kelly went to him, shooting me a look that said everything I needed to hear. Enough. When Luke finally left, slamming the door so hard the walls rattled, I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My hands were shaking. My chest felt hollow. But even through the fear and the guilt, there was something else there too. Relief. Relief that, for the first time, I'd said no. I just didn't know then what that one word would cost me. It didn't take long for my parents to get involved. That's how it always went with Luke. Whenever things didn't go his way, he ran straight to mom and dad. They were his built-in safety net, the ones who had always believed his every excuse, no matter how many times he let them down. Emily called me first. I was at work, standing next to the rig, waiting for the next emergency call. My phone buzzed, and I almost didn't answer. But it was Mom, so I picked up. "Noah," she said, her voice tight with disappointment. "Your brother told us what happened. I can't believe you'd turn your back on family like that." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of her words settle in my chest. "Mom, I've helped him over and over. We're about to have another baby." She cut me off, her tone turning sharp. "Don't you dare use that as an excuse. Luke is your brother. He needs you. You're putting money above family, Noah. That's not how we raised you." I swallowed, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's not about the money, Mom. It's about how we've been living in this cycle for years. It's not fair to Kelly or Max. I can't do it anymore." But she didn't want to hear it. "You think you're so much better because you have a steady job? Because you play hero at work? You're no hero to your family if you turn your back on your own brother." She hung up on me before I could respond, leaving me standing there in the cold, my stomach twisted in knots. An hour later, Dad called. Frank wasn't a man of many words. He was more the quiet type, but when he spoke, it always felt like a final judgment. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. "You know what your problem is, Noah," he said flatly. "You forgot where you came from. You think you're better than the rest of us because you drive an ambulance and have a family of your own. But you're not. You're supposed to be there for your brother. That's what family does." I tried to explain, but he wouldn't let me. "I'm not going to argue with you," he said. "If you won't help Luke, then you're no son of mine. No son of mine." I felt like he'd punched me in the gut. My own father, cutting me off because I wouldn't keep emptying my pockets to fix Luke's messes. When I got home that night, Kelly was waiting for me in the living room. She didn't say anything at first, just took my hand in hers and squeezed. "I heard what they said," she whispered. "You did the right thing, Noah. I'm proud of you." But even as she said the words, I felt the weight of my parents' rejection pressing down on me. I'd always been the one to keep the peace, the one to step up when no one else would. Now, for the first time, I wasn't sure where that left me. I lay awake for hours that night, staring at the ceiling while Kelly slept beside me. My parents' words echoed in my head, their disappointment slicing through me like glass. But underneath it all, there was something else, a quiet certainty that this was the line I couldn't cross. I wasn't going to let their guilt and manipulation decide how I lived my life. I wasn't going to let them keep pulling me back into Luke's shadow. I had a family of my own now, and it was time I put them first, even if it meant losing the only family I'd ever known. It was September 2024 when everything came to a head. Kelly had been having contractions on and off for days, and we were both on edge, waiting for the moment when it would finally be time to head to the hospital. We'd been through it once before with Max, but this time felt different, harder. Somehow, I guess part of me was just scared because I knew how alone we were now. That morning, Kelly's water broke. I called my mom right away, hoping that maybe, just maybe, things could be normal for a little while. I asked if she and Dad could pick up Max from daycare, so I could focus on getting Kelly to the hospital. She didn't hesitate. She said they'd be there in half an hour. And for the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of relief. Maybe they'd finally stopped seeing me as the enemy. Maybe they'd softened. We left Max's backpack by the door, packed with his favorite stuffed bunny and a little note I'd scribbled. Daddy loves you, and he'll be back soon. It was silly, I know, but I wanted him to feel safe. At the hospital, everything happened so fast. Kelly's labor was intense. There were moments when she was crying out, squeezing my hand so hard I thought my fingers might snap. But when I looked into her eyes, I saw her strength, the same quiet strength that had carried us through so many rough patches. In the delivery room, everything else disappeared. I was there, fully there, for Kelly and our new baby girl, Ellie. The moment she came into the world, all red-faced and squalling, I felt that same fierce love I'd felt the first time I held Max. I thought of all the promises I'd made to him and to her, and I knew I'd keep them, no matter what. It was later that evening when I realized something was wrong. My phone had been on silent during the birth, but when I checked it afterward, I had a dozen missed calls from the daycare. My stomach turned cold. I called back right away, but the woman who answered said, "Max isn't here. Your parents picked him up hours ago." I tried calling my mom. No answer. My dad. No answer. Luke. Even. Nothing. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the phone. Kelly was resting, so I told her I was going to check on Max and slipped out of the room, my heart thudding in my chest. I must have called 100 times before my phone finally rang. A pastor I didn't know, from a community center in Ballard, said he had Max with him. Max had been found outside, alone, sitting on the steps of the community center with tears in his eyes. I don't remember the drive over. My mind was a blur, full of panic and rage and this deep, aching fear I couldn't shake. When I finally saw Max sitting there, his little face red from crying, I felt something in me crack. I scooped him up in my arms. "Max, buddy, are you okay? What happened?" He sniffled, his small hands clutching my shirt. "Grandma and Grandpa said. They said you didn't love me anymore." His voice was so quiet, so broken, that I could barely breathe. My parents had always played their games, but this was different. This wasn't just about money or family loyalty or picking sides. This was about my son. They'd left him alone in the cold, to prove a point, to hurt me in the deepest way they could. I drove back to the hospital with Max strapped in the back seat, his stuffed bunny clutched in his arms like a lifeline. My hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel, my mind racing with 1,000 questions, but one thing was crystal clear. I wasn't going to let this slide. Back at the hospital, Kelly looked at me with tired eyes as I walked in, Max trailing behind me, his face streaked with dried tears. She didn't even have to ask. She knew. I kissed her forehead, my voice hoarse as I whispered, "I'm done. I'm done with them." And in that moment, holding Max's hand in one of mine and Kelly's in the other, I knew I meant it. That night, after leaving the hospital, I drove straight to my parents' house with Max asleep in the back seat. The streets were quiet and dark, the way they always are in Seattle late at night, but inside me, everything was boiling. When I pulled up in front of their house, I took a deep breath and turned off the engine. My hands were still shaking, but I couldn't let that stop me. I looked at Max in the rearview mirror, his little face peaceful in sleep, and I promised myself that I wouldn't let them do this to him again. I knocked on their door, hard. My mom answered, her face pinched with irritation. "Noah," she said, her voice cold. "You shouldn't be here." I pushed past her, stepping into the living room. My dad was sitting in his armchair, looking like he'd been waiting for this. "You left Max alone," I said, my voice low and trembling with anger. "You left him outside a community center. He's 6 years old." My dad didn't even flinch. "We did what we had to do," he said. "Family means sacrifice, Noah. You didn't help your brother, so we don't owe your child anything." I stared at him, stunned. My mom was nodding along, like this was some kind of twisted lesson they were trying to teach me. "You think leaving a 6-year-old alone in the cold is some kind of lesson?" I said, my voice cracking. "He's a kid, your grandson. How could you do that to him?" My mom crossed her arms. "He needed to learn that actions have consequences. So do you." I took a step back, my heart pounding. "This isn't about family. This is about control. You've been doing this my whole life, pitting us against each other, making everything a test I could never pass." My dad's mouth twitched like he wanted to argue, but he stayed silent. My mom just shook her head. "You're making this bigger than it needs to be," she said. "If you'd just done what Luke asked." "I've done enough," I snapped. "I've given enough. And now, I'm done. You're not going to see Max again. You're not going to hurt him the way you hurt me." They both stared at me, stunned. I could see it in their faces, the disbelief that I was really standing up to them this time. I turned to go, but then I paused. "I'm going to make sure you face consequences for what you did," I said, my voice steady. "I'm not going to let this slide." My mom's face went pale. My dad's lips pressed into a thin line, but he didn't say a word. I walked back out to the car, my hands still shaking but my head clearer than it had been in years. When I got home, Kelly's parents were already there. They'd driven all the way from Spokane as soon as they heard what happened. They took Max in their arms, holding him like he was the most precious thing in the world. That night, Kelly and I talked for hours. She didn't tell me what to do, she just listened, her hand on mine, her eyes full of quiet strength. I want to take them to court, I said finally. I want to make sure they can't ever do this to Max again. She nodded. Then that's what we'll do. And in that moment, I knew I wasn't alone anymore. I wasn't the scared kid trying to win my parents' approval. I was a father, and I was done letting anyone hurt my child. The weeks after that night were a blur of paperwork and court filings, phone calls, and late-night strategy sessions. Kelly's parents had moved in temporarily to help with Max and Ellie, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I wasn't carrying this alone. We hired a child protection attorney named Maria Sanchez. She was tough, with a calm voice and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She listened to everything I said, never once interrupting, and when I finished, she just nodded and said, "We're going to make sure they answer for this." She started gathering evidence right away, security footage from the community center showing Max sitting outside alone, the daycare statements about my parents picking him up, even the voicemail I'd gotten from the pastor. It was surreal, seeing it all laid out in black and white. Proof that my parents, the same people who used to call me their son, had abandoned my child to send a message. I remember the first time we met in her office, Maria looking over her glasses at me. "Noah, this is going to get ugly," she said. "They're going to try to make it about you, about family disputes and misunderstandings. But this isn't a misunderstanding, it's child endangerment." I nodded. "I know." She paused, studying me. "Are you sure you're ready to cut ties with them for good?" I thought of Max's tear-streaked face that night, the way he clutched his bunny so tight I thought it might burst at the seams. "Yeah," I said, my voice steady. "I'm sure." The day of the hearing came faster than I expected. The courtroom was packed, friends, family, people from the neighborhood who had heard about what happened. Kelly sat beside me, her hand in mine, and her parents were behind us, a steady presence. My parents sat on the other side of the room. My mom looked like she'd aged 10 years, her lips pressed into a tight line. My dad sat stiff and silent, his eyes cold and unreadable. Maria stood up and spoke with a calm that made me feel like we could actually win. She didn't try to dress it up. "This isn't about a family disagreement," she said. "This is about a child, Max Turner, who was left alone in the dark because his grandparents wanted to teach his father a lesson. There is no lesson in abandoning a child. There is only danger." She played the security footage. The courtroom went still as everyone watched Max's small figure, sitting there all alone, hugging his backpack like it was the only safe thing in the world. My parents' lawyer tried to spin it. He talked about how it was a misunderstanding, how they thought someone else was coming for Max, how they were just trying to make a point. But every time he tried to twist the story, Maria was there, calm and precise, cutting through the excuses like they were paper. The judge listened without expression, her eyes flicking back and forth between my parents and me. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady and clear. "Emily and Frank Turner, I find you guilty of child endangerment. You are hereby prohibited from any contact with Max Turner for a period of 3 years." I let out a breath I didn't even realize I'd been holding. Kelly squeezed my hand so hard I thought it might break, and I didn't care. We'd done it. We protected Max. As the judge's gavel fell, my mom looked at me, her eyes wide with disbelief, like she'd finally realized this wasn't just another family argument she could smooth over with a few well-placed words. My dad didn't look at me at all. Afterward, we stepped out into the cool Seattle air. I looked down at Max, holding Kelly's hand, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I saw him smile, a real smile. It wasn't the end of everything, but it was a beginning, a chance to start over, a chance to build something better. And in that moment, I knew that whatever else happened, we were going to be okay. In the months that followed the trial, our lives slowly shifted back into something that felt like normal. We repainted the house, bright colors that made it feel like ours again. And every night, laughter and music filled the air instead of tension and worry. Kelly decided to leave her job at the advertising firm. She wanted to be home with Max and Ellie, to soak up every moment she'd missed when she was working late nights and weekends. I understood. It felt like we'd all been holding our breath for so long, just trying to survive. Now, we could finally exhale. Kelly's parents stayed longer than they planned, and it turned out to be the best thing for all of us. They doted on Max and Ellie like their world revolved around them. Max started smiling more, running through the house with his toy trucks, his laughter echoing off the walls. Ellie was growing fast. Every day, she looked more like Kelly, with those big, curious eyes and that unstoppable grin. One evening, I was watching Max build an elaborate track for his trucks in the living room when I got a text from Luke. It had been months since I'd spoken to him, months since he'd stormed out of my house, accusing me of turning my back on family. But the message was short, almost shy. "Luke, I'm sorry for everything. I'm paying you back, starting this week. I swear I'm trying." I didn't respond right away. I just sat there for a while, staring at the words, feeling 100 different things at once. Luke had always been my responsibility, the one I'd been taught to put before myself. But now, maybe he was finally ready to stand on his own. I hoped he was. A few days later, he sent me a small payment. It wasn't much, but it was something. And that was enough for now. Maybe we'd never be close again. Maybe we'd never even speak much beyond this. but it was a step in the right direction, and I was okay with that. One night, after I'd tucked Max into bed and kissed Ellie's soft forehead, I sat out on the porch with Kelly. The night was cool, the city lights twinkling in the distance. She leaned her head against my shoulder, and we sat in silence for a while. "I can't believe how far we've come," she said softly. I nodded. "I know. It feels like we're finally free, you know?" She smiled, her hand finding mine. "We are, Noah. We really are." I thought back to those endless days of trying to fix everything for everyone else, of carrying the weight of a family that was never really mine. I thought of my parents' cold eyes in the courtroom, of Luke's bitter anger, and then I thought of Max's giggle as he raised his trucks around the living room, of Ellie's sleepy sighs as she nestled into Kelly's arms. I thought of this new family we were building, brick by brick, laughter by laughter, and I realized I wasn't scared anymore. I'd protected my son, I'd protected my family, and I'd finally stepped out of the shadow of a past that didn't deserve me. As I sat there, Kelly's head warm against my shoulder and the night quiet around us, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. Maybe this was what it meant to start over, to take the pieces of the life I'd been given and build something stronger, something softer, something real. And for the first time, I let myself believe that we were going to be okay, because we were. We really were.